Fantastic Tech It Out event. I hope everyone's been enjoying all of the sessions today. I hope that we have equally enjoyable and informative session. And I really invite you to come in early with your questions. We're doing this because we hope to be useful to you and want to know what it is that you're thinking about, the things that you're working with, and the issues that you'd love for our great panelists, Brian and Phil, to talk about, who I will introduce momentarily. But just as you're joining this session called Leveraging AR and VR in Marketing Campaigns, I'd like to invite you to use the chat box to just check in and say hello and let us know that you're out there. And maybe let us know if you're watching, what you're watching, and if you're watching something that has a VR and AR component, or should have a VR and AR component. And we can get Brian and Phil's thoughts on that. So let me introduce our guests. My name is Darren Campo. Today we have with us Brian Seth Hurst, who is the founder and chief storyteller of Storytech Immersive. Storytech Immersive works with content creators to produce and distribute high quality VR, including embedding VR filmmakers into production. He recently produced My Brother's Keeper, Showtime's The Circus 360 Experience, which is a companion of that great show on Showtime, Circus, the greatest show on earth, greatest political show on earth. Brian was also a member of the original TiVo team. He worked to rebrand and relaunch TV Guide. He's done countless jobs for the Television Academy and important work for the PGA. He's also the author of 2 books. One is called The Pigtail, which he co-authored with Olivia Newton-John, and the other is called Whole, which is a collection of essays on life challenges. And I have read that book, and it is one of my favorites. I highly recommend checking it out. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
And our other guest, sure. Our other guest today, Phil Lelyveld. Phil runs the Immersive Media Initiative at the University of Southern California's Entertainment Technology Center. And because it's such a long name, we call it ETC at USC for short, which is a think tank within the School of Cinematic Arts. Phil's AR and VR initiatives work to shape the emerging art form. He also works with a lot of work, including the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and blockchain, which one day we will all understand. Prior to that, Phil oversaw the Next Generation Display project. He managed the Consumer 3D Experience Lab. And Phil joined after 10 years as VP at Disney. But most fascinating to me, he was a researcher predicting earthquakes and volcanoes. So what a great background, Phil. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we're talking about AR and VR, and we hear a lot of these terms a lot of times. Let me start with you, Phil, by asking, what do we mean by AR and VR and MR, and how does that relate to some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd like to start by using a quote from Vicky Dobbs-Beck, who's leading the ILM X Lab. And Vicky Dobbs-Beck says, VR lets you see a different world, and AR lets you see the world differently. So VR is about capturing as much of your senses as possible and embedding you in a different place, a different time, a different experience, whereas AR adds to the world around you. This whole field, I think, and Brian can contradict me if he wants to, started in VR. It actually started with 3D, if you remember 3D television and 3D movies and that sort of thing. When we started putting on headsets, everybody who hated 3D forgot the fact that the headsets themselves were 3D, and suddenly you're immersed visually in a new world in virtual reality. Over time, as the technology improved, we've gotten into augmented reality, which is adding digital elements to the world around you. So it's a continuum. When you're in those VR headsets, you want to see the world, so you don't walk into the furniture. So they have little ghosting. But the bottom line is we're moving towards a world that's primarily going to be augmented reality, which is why it's so important for marketing and entertainment, because essentially it's enhancing the world around you. And it can provide you more information. It can do product placement. It can do demos for things that you couldn't physically demo to the average person very cheaply digitally, or well, I won't say cheaply, but digitally. And essentially, and we have to be careful that we don't only talk about visual experiences, because we're moving into a future that has spatial audio, and audio for storytelling and for advertising is going to be extremely important, because you can listen while you're looking at other things, as well as other sensory input like haptics. And we're actually experimenting with taste and smell. So things are coming along. But essentially, if you had to differentiate them, VR takes you away from the world and puts you someplace else. AR leaves you in the world, but adds things to it. And really, we're getting into mixed reality, MR, where you're dealing with the blending of the physical and the virtual in your day-to-day lives.
Great, thanks, Phil. I think that may be the clearest delineation between the ARs and VRs I've heard, having formerly been addicted to Pokemon Go and tripping over things in augmented reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to talk more about things that go beyond the visual experience further. Brian, for most of your career, I think people think of you as someone sort of who's always been on the cutting edge, especially in television and media. I would just love to hear a little bit about, how your career in that area went, and what sort of always inspired you to lean into the newest technologies and to always be an early adopter of these things.
Well, I think I look at the world as a storyteller. So anything that enables a person to get into a story is something that I'm interested in, and I love technology. So the reason story tech is included is because story always comes before technology. And to me, technology must enable a story to be told. So when VR came along, and oddly enough, Phil, I saw it at the University of British Columbia in like 1997. And it was absolutely huge. A guy from Columbia University had come, and what they were doing was a augmented reality thing where there was the Colosseum in Rome as it is today, and then it added the rest. You got to see the rest. It like built it up to what it was, and suddenly you were there. And I remember making a mental note that one day I'm going to be doing this. And when Gear VR was released by Samsung, I got it delivered on the exact day that it was released. I put it on, and Felix and Paul, a well-known production company in VR, had done this Welcome to VR video. And I'm getting the chills even as I tell the story. And I was in that video and I cried, not because of the content, but because of a storyteller thinking, oh my gosh, all you ever want to do as a writer is bring people into the story world that you have created. And that was it. And my business partner at the time was like, oh, no, we're not going into virtual reality. There's no money in it. There's no money. And I was like, you know what? I am going into virtual reality. It's a long game. I knew that from the beginning. But I wanted to learn as much as I could. That's actually how my whole career has been, is learn as much as you can about the emerging technologies. And to me, it was become as much of an expert as you can and then experiment. It was very interesting to me that my relationships of 25 years in the television business had all come into play. So everybody wanted to know about it. So we did presentations, educational presentations at USA Networks, at NBC in New York, at Showtime, and at PBS. And PBS was the first network to jump. And they said, we have the show on the air. called Mercy Street. It's about the Civil War. And what we want to do is we want to plunk a VR camera down in the hospital so people know what it was like. And I said, you're missing the whole opportunity. We don't just plunk cameras down. And in those days, people thought, yes, you just station a camera and you act around it. So I knew what I wanted to see. I had gone to a film festival, the Kaleidoscope Film Festival, and discovered these two filmmakers, Connor Hare and Alex Meter. And I said, Connor was not there, his girlfriend was. And I said, you tell Connor to get in touch with me. I'm going to work with him. The opportunity came. When I think of VR and just the environment that you're in, I think sometimes it's easier to look at it from a technology point of view. So with VR, you're going to put a headset on and you're going to be in a different world. With AR, you're going to use your phone to augment the world that you're in. And there's a crossover of that on the web. So long story short, we did camera movement. We did slow motion in VR for the very first time. This is a piece called My Brother's Keeper, which if you have a VR headset, it's on Oculus TV. You can search there. It's on HTC. It's just about everywhere. And you can even see it in 360 on YouTube 360. But the opportunity to tell stories that would give people a visceral experience blew my mind. And I said, I'm just going to stick with cinematic reality because virtual reality, because I want to become an expert at that. I doubt I'll do augmented reality. Well, then we were asked to do augmented reality, and we did a thing called Passport to Philadelphia, where actually you held up your phone. There were a million different functions you could do, but we told you the story of Benjamin Franklin when the statue was there. And then we created a 3D model of Benjamin Franklin that you could actually put your arm around and your friend could take a picture, an augmented reality picture. We took you up to the top of Philadelphia to City Hall, and we augmented all of what was around you, what you were seeing. And then to me, it was like, and this is a very long answer, but then to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I never realized that AR is also a medium for storytelling, and that Pokemon Go aside, that you can actually have a story that is told through augmented reality, like the story of downtown Vancouver, if you will, or the story of downtown Philadelphia. And so to me, it continues to be a medium for storytelling. Now, from the entertainment perspective, it's slow going because in this country, there's not a lot of money for it. Other countries are subsidized. But in the enterprise area, it's both AR and VR are huge. And what I think is, from an AR perspective, to be a utility for people who are like being in New York, it is now a smart city, Darren. It is now a smart city. And to be able to use augmented reality, and the first guys that did it were Layer in the Netherlands, but to be able to look at what you're looking at in New York and get the definition of what you're looking at, or get the train schedule or any of that, it's all there for us. And I've always been very optimistic, even in the slumps. But from a storytelling point of view, I think that anything that enables someone to enter and participate in a story is great. Sorry, long answer.
No, thank you. It's terrific. Having lived here for 30 years, it has definitely gotten smarter. You know, you don't want to go into the subway when it's 100 degrees out 1 second before the train's coming. So it sounds to me like VR sort of maybe where it is today, more adjacent to things that are nonfiction or educational, or I mean AR, maybe sort of incorporating the world around us, whereas VR may be the total immersive entertainment experience. Is that correct? Are those the best uses for those things, or is there a different way to think about it?
I would say, Brian, you can jump in a second. I would say just think of them as platforms, just like a canvas or a camera. They're good for all sorts of things. As Brian alluded to, in the medical industry, VR and AR are both really important. VR immerses you into an operation. We had a project a couple of years ago where we used VR to simulate how the cell works so that we could model drug testing, which was good for both immersive researchers, but also patients, to show them what happens to encourage them to take their drugs on schedule. Whereas AR is used for augmenting operations so that you can visualize it and actually see overlays of what you should be doing while you're operating. But that's nonfiction. On the fiction side, and we can talk about this more later, we're playing with autonomous characters, your digital friend that lives with you 24/7. Our goal is a 30-year character. So you can have an augmented person come and go in your life, and that's fiction, but it's still useful. So I would classify them as platforms, but I would say the future, as I see it, is 90% augmented reality, 10% virtual reality, just because you can wear glasses all day, but you don't want to have that headset on all day.
I think that headsets are going to get a lot thinner and a lot lighter. And I think the two will be combined in the future, where you can literally like pull it down, shut out the world, and have VR. And just to Phil's point, in the medical industry, when you put a person who's in treatment for burns inside a VR headset, their pain level actually goes down. If you put them in a colder environment in that headset, even more so. If you put them inside a story, it's a great distraction. So the money for creators right now in this country is more in enterprise. I think Darren, I spoke to you yesterday, we're working with the California Department of Corrections to help incarcerated individuals adjust to the real world using VR before they're released. So I wouldn't go for the 90, 80, I wouldn't go for any percentage. I would say, what's the job that needs to be done and what's the platform that suits the job? And I think the more on the enterprise side that people get used to headsets, and I just read today Lenovo's releasing Think Reality, which is a new augmented reality glasses, Apple's working on them. The more we get used to all of these things, the more we'll want to plunge into those worlds. And to not dwell on Ready Player One, but you know, people will want to escape, just like I wanted to watch Bewitched in the 60s because it was so hard. People will want to escape into a different world and set the world aside. And I think that's something that's not being factored in right now. Just on another note, Storytech Immersive curates the Vancouver International Film Festival VIFF Immersed. And we have 4 categories. We have animation, documentary, and cinematic. Cinematic is fiction, doc is, of course, doc. Animation is brilliant. We have Namu this year from Baobab. There's some really great properties, and AR storytelling. And so we're looking at content from around the world that's being supported in entertainment specifically. At the same time, you can see Walmart is now using VR headsets to train, and AR to train employees. It's much less expensive to send out headsets than it is to fly people to a center, especially today. And I do think that the pandemic has sort of pushed things ahead into a hybrid future. So the technology has been there for us. Now it's more useful, it makes more sense, and it's becoming more accessible. Interestingly enough, on the HTC side, they've gone completely, HTC is a headset manufacturer for VR, and they've gone completely to the enterprise and gaming side, whereas Oculus Quest has gone to the consumer side for entertainment and gaming. And gaming in VR is actually leading the way. It's ahead of entertainment content. But I think for brands, augmented reality is the opportunity. How can you bring more service? If you're, I'm constantly scanning QR codes to, when I'm in a store to see if I can get a better price. What if all I had to do was hold up my phone and all the product features come out, and then all the comparisons and stuff, and Walmart is providing that service for me, or any other, or in the new bricks and mortar Amazon stores. I'm sure augmented reality will be a part of that at retail.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to bring it back to the advertising side of things, and my preference for AR over VR, not my preference, but my emphasis. When you're thinking in terms of advertising and marketing campaigns and the expense of producing these things, remember that AR pretty much works very well on phones and tablets. And we are coming to an age where you're going to have the glasses. And actually, there's a number of companies, one of which is Mojo Vision, which is getting FDA review of a contact lens for augmented reality. But think in terms of, you've got this entire installed base of cell phones that could be used for advertising campaigns. So in terms of cost of production, you want to make sure that you're not spending more on something that won't have that countering marketing value. You want to be sure the audience is big enough to justify the cost of production. And Brian can say a lot more about this if he wants to, but you got to make sure you understand how big the audience is. And you also want to think in terms of future-proofing it, making it useful. So you could actually be building a world as a marketing campaign, just piece by piece, as you see how effective each piece becomes.
I'd love to just go on a little bit more about the hardware stuff, because it seems like the hardware and the technology changed so quickly. And one of the really hopeful things about all of this is that, I don't know if it's Wright's law or Moore's law that we follow these days, but things will get cheaper. And so next year we couldn't afford it. Last year we couldn't afford it. Next year we could. Next, 10 years, everyone can do it. So the direction that we're headed with, I don't know if it's headsets or ear implants or Neuralink. Elon Musk always has something going on that's crazy, but that's basically just an electronic connection direct to the brain. Is this all inevitable? Is this all where it's going?
Yeah, more and more sensory input, and the cost is coming down. Just like now, if you're old enough to remember the first PCs, we used to have to buy, spell checkers separate from the word processor. And as technology advances, these things aren't getting simpler. Hopefully the UX will become a lot better. But we're heading towards more sensory input and data gathering. We can talk about the ethics of that in a second if you want to. But I was at a conference yesterday on the brain-computer interface, where you think of Elon Musk with the embedding something in your head, but the reality is you can have a shower cap on that have sensors that press against your skin, and you can monitor brain waves and heart function and sweat and things like that. So here, not to plug USC too much, but there was a group at USC developing a headset add-on for capturing all that, because they're trying to figure out useful brain-computer interfaces so that you can just think things. So this is all coming along, and the price will come down, and eventually it'll just be razors and razor blades, where you'll get your glasses, which do amazing things, for free, because it'll be sponsored by something that pops up into your field of view, when you least expect it.
Just to augment what Phil said, excuse the word augment, but Helium, Helium, is a company that produces meditation for augmented reality and for virtual reality. And there actually is a brain interface. So your brain waves, the way you're relaxed, controls what you're seeing inside the headset. I wish that I could predict where hardware is going. I know it will get lighter. I know that screen resolution, the things that I'm concerned with as a storyteller is screen resolution and sound and processing power in a standalone headset. So for example, we're working right now, great company in Culver City called 4D Fun. They do volumetric, and they do it better than anyone I've seen to date. And we're working on a project with them. And it was very, very important to me that they have the quality, the level of quality of spatial sound that was going to match the picture. They had sound, and they have it, and it's good, but it's not what I know can be produced from my past experience as a producer. So we brought in another company here, 360, to help us on this project. So I'm concerned about distribution. Well, okay, the first thing is hardware. How easy is it for people to get that hardware? What's the price point? But what are the technological specifications? It's much easier for people who are not gamers to get a standalone headset like Oculus Quest 2 at $299 than to get the whole kit for PC based. So what can I produce in terms of a great story experience that's for the Oculus Quest 2? Because really that's the only game in town right now, if you don't want to be connected to a PC. And then after that, it becomes about, okay, if I'm spending the money to distribute something on an Oculus Quest 2, there's the Xiaomi in China. There's a whole, China is so far ahead in this. And my brother's keeper was at the Museum of Modern Art in Shanghai. And they have location-based entertainment venues that are not just surround sound, but they are all equipped with headsets. And they're paying for distribution of content. So if I'm investing in content now, how can that content, as Phil said, be future-proof? Well, I'm going to shoot it at the highest resolution possible, even though it can't be seen at that resolution right now. So if I can shoot in 12K or 16K or whatever the cameras, and they change all the time as well. There are new camera technologies. The Sony XR0, I think it is, can't remember. Anyway, that 40 of those can be used to produce this incredibly immersive experience. So the things that I worry about are on both sides. As a producer, I've got to look at the latest production technology that's going to allow an efficient production, is going to push the envelope in a way that's going to support the story. Then on the distribution side, as Phil said, where's this going to go? How am I going to make money at this? This is why we are playing in enterprise, because the opportunity for storytellers to experiment in enterprise, it's being funded, and then take that knowledge and put it into entertainment. As far as AR goes, I don't doubt that, and it's already happening, that if your dishwasher breaks and it's something you can fix, you'll be able to hold your phone up, dial into customer service, and they will give you the instructions of how to fix it. And hopefully they will have a really great guy or gal helping you do that and turning it into some sort of storified experience so that it isn't freaking you out that suddenly you have to repair your own dishwasher.
Yeah, and just to, in a sense, emphasize or put a different spin on it, but totally agreeing with what Brian said, you need a pipeline of content to justify the hardware. People aren't just going to buy the hardware for its hardware's sake. So right now, we can distribute augmented reality over cell phones. You can also use glasses, but cell phones is where most people are seeing it, and tablets and the equivalent. We don't want a situation like we had with 3D televisions, which I got one of, where there was no pipeline of content to justify market growth. So this is a long way of saying we already have a distribution path through cell phones. As those headsets come on board, they're piggybacking on the distribution network of the cell phones, but giving you additional benefits. And they have to give you additional benefits to justify, for you to justify actually buying them, as opposed to just staying with your cell phone. But this is coming because, well, twofold. One, for entertainment, for stories. People like Brian are producing those. So we're building up libraries all over the place. On the business and technical side, companies are just starting to use this, as was mentioned earlier, for training and education. Both for AR development, I don't know how many people know this, but Facebook, Snapchat, and now TikTok all have AR development programs. They're trying to encourage the development of this stuff in order to, well, sell more glasses and headsets when they come out. But when you think about that and their large user base, you have tremendous potential for creating a pipeline of content, which then more heavily funded players like the studios and the game companies can piggyback off of and create new experiences as well. So it's coming. You can't really predict what the winner is going to be, but what's nice now is that we have this base of cell phones that at least you can distribute on those. And then when the other stuff comes, especially with things like gesture recognition through the glasses, you'll start seeing amazing things that will justify up buying. Okay.
I just want to, Darren, I wanted to mention some content because I noticed something in the chat window. So in AR, in terms of storytelling, go get Wallace and Gromit. It is the best AR experience I have seen. It is so much fun and it is adorable. And then on the VR side, so Xfinity is creating Xfinity World. This is Comcast. And you could go into this Olympic environment, which was created by them and Cosm. And I want to tell you, when I went to watch the gymnastics, the way they set it up, you had a great seat, but when you watch it on television, you get this much. When you are inside the Xfinity world, you have the entire arena. It's like a 3-ring circus, and you can see exactly what's happening and exactly what the experience is in. And the camera work was great. It's the Olympic broadcasting system that's shooting it. But now Xfinity is going on to continue to build Xfinity World. This is my understanding, to build Xfinity World as a channel for VR content. And right now it's available on the Oculus Quest. So that means the opportunity for creators to start working on content that will then go into kind of a cable system, a channel system that would be available in VR.
And one thing that was in the background of what Brian just said is we're talking about the evolution of new languages of storytelling. And if you're going to do a 360, make sure there's a reason to do it. Even in Brother's Keeper, Brian's piece, when he wants to focus your attention, he narrows the screen down to what, a circle?
We went from 360. We went from 360 to 180, and the credit for all this goes to the directors, Connor, not me, Connor Hare and Alex Meter. My job was just to make sure that they could get what they wanted, that their vision, we all wrote the piece, but to make sure that they could get what they wanted. And the idea in this case, Phil, was that these are two brothers fighting on opposite sides of the Civil War, having no idea that they're going to meet one last time. The closer the brothers get to each other, that's when it starts to move from 360 into 180. And we're actually using a very old film technique called bokeh, which is blurring the sides to get you to focus. And that actually worked.
Right. And go ahead.
Such an important conversation. I'd love to continue this. I just want to encourage us to continue this because Phil, you mentioned 3D TV, and there was a time 10 years ago, 12 years ago, where everyone was like, let's try 3D for no reason other than we think it's popular. How do we keep the consumer in mind and the experience in mind and don't become the next Quibi, where we have an idea, we think there's a demand for something, there really isn't. It's just technology that we've fallen in love with. How do we make sure that what we're doing is actually enhancing the experience and not making something that people don't want?
Right. All right, Brian, you answer. My answer is market research. Essentially, think about it, when you're creating it, think in terms of, am I adding value for my product to the potential consumer, to the target audience? If it's just, build it because I thought of it, that's no good. I would do some market testing, but there's no way of knowing what will resonate because there are other factors that are influencing the consumer's behavior. But in terms of knowing its value, a
camera and a phone would work.
Well, I mean, I just think of the IKEA app where you're measuring things on your phone and you're putting furniture in your home to see what it looks like. I mean, there's a clear use for that. So that was a good idea in terms of marketing. I can't think of any marketing fails. I probably wouldn't want to bring them up. But there are ways to just, like 4 years ago, to grab attention, Porsche distributed a piece of plastic in magazines that folded up into a pyramid that you put on your phone, and then it projected the phone that a picture of a car that reflected off the pyramid, and you can turn the phone and get 4 views of the car. That was cool. I'm not sure how many people actually took out the plastic. Maybe that's a fail. I have no idea. But just think in terms of, are you adding value for the experience? Because if it's just like a one-off that I get the sense of in 2 seconds, that's no good.
I think, Darren, that it is a tough sell. Because you're modifying consumer behavior. Yes, they're used to their phones, but to a certain extent, you have to teach them how to do something new. And so as they enter into this new world, like the portal world, like you can go right onto the NBA court if you want, just walk in. We used the portal for Philadelphia. We all walked right into the Rodin Museum. So you have to be really specific in your instructions. The ease of use has to be without question. There has to be no friction. But then when you're selling it, well, how do you explain an experience to someone without them being in the experience like VR? It's a really tough sell. And also there are no freaking standards quite yet. I mean, you have your AR kit for for Android, and then Apple, you have the iOS. I mean, it's just like for creators, and I know Unity, Tony Parisi, they're taking off like crazy with advertisers, and that is great. That's a great example of advertisers making things useful, even if it's just, you know, the Coke cap being your entry to the world of Coke. But I do think it's a very tough sell. I agree with Phil. There's a certain amount you can know through market research, but disruption doesn't seem to ever come out of market research. It just seems to just come. So that's why, and I was joking about that just this weekend, which is whoever thought that I'd be able to take such great quality photos at the top of the Empire State Building with my freaking phone. I mean, who would have ever thought anybody would use their phone as a camera?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've spent most of my career in television walking the line between doing market research and producing content. And it's still, you know, one of the greatest areas of friction, even at Netflix. You know, they can say, here's the thumbnail that causes the greatest intent to watch, but it only has, you know, one of the stars on it. We have to do talent relations, or we have to do these kinds of things. So I think it's always useful to be able to sort of look at the points where we can take a leap from the research into the what has happened in the content. And one thing I keep hearing both of you saying is that there's a functional use that people want, whether it's taking pictures or measuring something, that, you know, we've all go to a restaurant now, we don't touch the menus, we scan the QR code, you know, everyone's gotten used to that. And so there's a functional part where then we're so used to it, then it can start leading into an entertainment experience or an enhanced entertainment experience that people have a sort of intuitive sense of. Does that sound right?
It does and it doesn't, because the possibilities are so wild and crazy. And, you know, who would have ever thought that TikTok would be what it is, this short form? That was Quibi's mistake, is that they didn't understand the mentality that was TikTok, or that even millennials will like quickly breeze through something. Then you have all of these, from a content perspective, you have like the fancy like dance challenge on TikTok that is now, because he mentioned Applebee's, it's now an Applebee commercial actually. And so here all of a sudden something took off that was a dance challenge to a great melody, propelled this guy's song to #1 that never would have happened in traditional radio. So I mean, there's always the opportunity for this disruption. I agree with utility. Like, you know, text, chat, who sends an email anymore? You know, it's like texting. And so I guess I can say yes, and, you know, yes and known, yes and unknown. And it's that unknown in the hands of Gen Z that excites me. It's like, how are they going to tell stories? Because they're all telling their own stories anyway. They're all storytellers now. Anybody can tell a story. But professionally, in terms of commercially produced content, how are they going to use the technologies that Phil and I are talking about when it's native to them? Like, there will be a generation to whom VR and AR is native. And once they're working from that point of view, all bets of us senior branders are off.
Right. One of my coworkers, E. Berquist, who focuses on artificial intelligence and story, has a metric called familiarness, which can apply to innovation as well, which is the idea that you don't want something that's a duplicate of something that's already been done because it bores people, but you don't want something so far out that it's so strange that they can't relate to it. So the metric of familiariness, something like that, is finding that midpoint that is new, so it gets your attention, but is familiar, so they're willing to give it a chance. And I can't tell you what the sweet spot is, but that's the sweet spot you're going for.
Can you, and so I guess yesterday, I saw this, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg, but everyone's talking about the metaverse and like this, I guess, ultimate virtual reality. And because we've lived our lives for the past 2 years on Zoom, going back to the point of utility, they're saying, okay, well, here's some avatars instead of us on two-dimensional screens. Is that going to be a jumping off point for AR and VR, or mixed version of them? Are we going to stop going to the movie theater and looking at a screen and go to, complete immersion?
Oh, no. I mean, no, one of my lines is no new technology replaces an old one. It just rebalances how important each one is. So Facebook just announced their Horizon, which is their version of Spatial out of New York, which is a way of virtual people interacting with real people in a business settings with virtual whiteboards and haptic feedback, so you can hold virtual objects and sense them. So that's going to be the virtual handshakes, that sort of thing. But in the Horizon case, I think one of their selling points is that they're demonstrating a future headset that will do eye tracking, so that your avatar can maintain eye contact with the people you're talking to. So every new bit is interesting.
Okay. Here's where that makes me, I won't say crazy. We are looking at each other, and there are signals that we are picking up on each other because of our faces, our eyes, and these things. Even though we do this Clubhouse every Thursday called the Writer's Room, and we had this whole discussion about virtual writer's room versus the real writer's room, and being able to pick up on signals and even pick up on someone's breathing next to you and how important that all these things are. And to me, an avatar doesn't do that for me. And maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe it's because I didn't live in Second Life. Maybe there are other signals that you can use, but the human face produces so many signals, both consciously and unconsciously. And body language produces so many signals that until AI gets to the point where a camera pointing at you can actually do, I guess, motion capture and capture those subtleties of movement, I don't know that I would be able to trust whether, if you and I are in a business meeting, and Phil, I know you've never lied to me, but if you and I are in a business meeting and I'm working with your avatar, I can't read those signals that might be very important to the future of our project. And that's where I worry about that line. That's where I get concerned about all the new technology, all the physiological responses that make us human and that allow us to read each other consciously and unconsciously through body language. And I know that AI is working on that. I know Edward Saatchi, great example, digital humans, they're working on all of these facial recognition stuff and programming that in. And I know the Digital Domain is doing it, but I don't know, and this is where I can probably be curmudgeonly, I don't know what will come to replace the actual human facial interaction that is so important in any exchange.
Right, so 2 points. One, I said it's a rebalancing, not a replacement. So you can still have your in-person writer's room. But if you have, gosh, I saw a post a couple of days ago from a writer who was based over in Indonesia who was taking part in a discussion in LA. So maybe they're at a disadvantage. But the second point is that could drive development of the things that compensate for what you're finding missing. And I mean, I don't know what that would be. It may have to require the brain-computer interface to get a sense of projecting emotion, unless you want to sit with constant body scanning to see what the other person is doing. But there will be solutions coming forward. Getting back to the original question of Darren's of, what will win out? Well, we'll have all this experimentation, as Chairman Mao said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And the winners will just kind of appear based on people adopting them, because ultimately what you care about is what you want to do, not what the technology does.
Great. I mean, I would not accuse either of you of being curmudgeonly. And I think the thing that we hear about a lot are, instincts and working with, the difference between being in the room and not being in the room. And people have great, really far-reaching views on this. I myself did when I had to leave the classroom, a year and a half ago, and do it virtually. My main complaint was this technology is not up to it. It's not going to replicate it, but it could soon. Some of the teleconference technology now is much better than what we're doing just right now.
Right, can I add something quickly in that?
Go ahead.
Because it has also opened up new things that I think are great that weren't happening before. So I run these, I had been running these, what I call executive coffee, where I bring, during this pandemic, I bring executives from our member companies, studios, gaming companies, et cetera, who have a question they would like to discuss with students, together with a curated group of students from all around the university. We actually did one on ethics, and I found we have a whole philosophy department I didn't know about, and we got philosophy students in on that. But what was great about that was I recorded them all on Zoom. Some of them were in South America, but they were taking part in the discussion. And I was able to reduce it down to a 10-minute highlight reel that's on our website for each of those conversations. So yes, you lose the in-person feedback, but we've gained the disappearance of distance so that I can bring in an expert in London for a conversation in LA with a group of students. So it's not just you've lost, we've also gained. And I hope to keep using Zoom going forward as a data gathering tool, because I want to find out what the next generation wants to create. I'm clearly not one of them. And it's been extremely useful for me. I'm sorry, but I interrupted.
Just because we're coming up to about our final 10 minutes, I do want to just go back to our make sure that we've exhausted some of our ideas about our original subject, which is how we incorporate this into marketing campaigns, and the notion that you were both talking about, that there's a specific language to film and television and AR and VR, and how do we bring that to marketing campaigns? Is it something that I'm walking through a store and I add, as you said, sound, it's not just a visual thing, or some other kind of, I think IKEA, was a leader in smell with the cinnamon buns, and somehow that got you to buy more futons. So are there any sort of things in the marketing world, the marketing campaigns that emerging that you see?
I can't reference one in specific, but what I can say is the use of GPS and beaconing, low energy beacons. So for example, if you're traveling and you arrive in a country, it welcomes you to that country because it knows you're on a different system. Well, I can do the same thing if my location notifications are on and I've downloaded your particular app. When I enter your store, like the Apple Store, welcome to the Apple Store. It just pops up and you can use your phone to purchase anything in the Apple Store without talking to a salesperson. If you're just buying accessories or something and you don't have any questions, that ability means I'm trading a bit of my data for convenience. And I think that agreement about data exchange for something useful in return, I think that's something to pay attention to. But I do think that, as Phil had said earlier, this utility. In other words, you're providing value, you're giving me utility. If I walk into the Apple Store, it's a great example. If I walk into the Apple Store, it says, welcome to the Apple Store. And what are you looking for? And we have a new company called Congrigo, and when it's for trade shows, and when you walk into the booth, it welcomes you to that specific trade show booth, connects you with a salesperson according to your interest. Your profile comes up, it's matched with their profile, and you're able to get ahead get going with business. So that whole thing, and also rewarding. So if I use this, what's my reward? Besides value and utility, is there a gamification element to this where I get a reward for playing along with you? And I think there are also social impact opportunities in using AR in certain communities. And I don't think that's been, really exploited yet. And I think it will be in the future because we are much more attuned now to that need to pay attention to community and community needs. So the use of AR in those aspects, I can't wait to see that as well.
Okay.
I don't know if that answered your question, Darren.
Yes,
Well,
great.
And that was specific examples. I want to give a very generic one, which is focus on mixed reality, the blending of physical and virtual objects and tools and activities. Because that can be done geolocated, that can be done any place. And I would also, in response to something Brian said, make sure you've got one click to turn off all the notifications so it doesn't become annoying. Because if the person doesn't want to see it, you don't want to be annoying them because they'll remember that more than they'll remember the ad probably.
I think this reflects Phil's experience with Clubhouse, but I'm not sure.
I have two more questions before we wrap up, and then I want to ask for your thoughts or your sort of bigger thoughts on the future. One of them, Brian just sort of touched on, and I guess we've all been touching on, but one of the most important aspects of linear television and movie going is a communal aspect, whether it's watching with your family. One of the things that I always tried to focus on with our producers at any network I worked on was, can people watch this together? Now I was doing that because I wanted, the old Nielsen system to have more people in the room and get higher ratings. But it also had a word of mouth effect, and it had sort of a self-marketing effect. And I think Phil made the point that once a medium is created, it's not destroyed. So that's why I have a pile of books here. They were never replaced, even though there's Kindles and I still read books. People still go to the movie theater because a lot of these things are social experiences. And we always liked social experiences. Maybe we've just noticed how much we like social experiences recently. But are AR and VR going to be able to enhance these social experiences in a way that we don't have right now?
So there's Sansar, which is actually WebVR and VR enabled. So you can access it on the web and you can access it in a VR headset. And that is amazing. It is all about social. It is all about community. In the headset, in Oculus, there's all VR. Now you're gathering with avatars, but it is a social thing. You can synchronize headsets to watch things at the same time. That's available. And I think in these virtual worlds, it is all about social and it is about sharing. It's just right now, it's not the easiest thing to get to. And it certainly is something you have to learn. It's new behavior that has to be learned of, what your options are on your controllers. And there's Museum of Other Realities, which is, that Vancouver is using, where you go in and you can go to various things on your own and you're meeting people and you're discussing, and they always have an after party where all the avatars can dance and you use your controllers to make your dance moves. So, but in terms of watching parties, those are happening as well inside of Alt VR. I just have never been to one.
Oh, I mean, we're already there. 4 or 5 years ago, when did Pokemon first catch on? Where I was walking around my neighborhood and meeting my neighbors who I had never seen before, and we're having these conversations because Pokemon was the topic of conversation. So you can already do that group stuff, and especially as we start geolocating hotspots and information that you can see from various angles, these create spontaneous socialization opportunities. So it's not just watching a story, it's we talk about experiences more than stories at the ETC. And there are lots of experiences now. It's just a question of what becomes a meme, what catches on.
And I know that it's such a great distinction between experiences and stories, because I think it was the thinking behind Quibi was that, people know how to do experiences very well, but long form storytelling is for the professionals, and we're starting to see that change a lot. And I do think that takes us to thinking about the future of storytelling, and something that I first saw in 1996, I think at CBS, was this thing called interactive TV, which was very clunky and had an eye pop up, and all the executives in the room, bah humbug, and that went away really quickly. But recently, Black Mirror had this whole Bandersnatch interactive episode, hugely expensive, had to shoot all of these choose your own adventures. I wonder if we're going to be seeing more of that. And I know, Phil, you run some simulations and some projects where you ask people to project out 3 to 5 years. Is there anything that you're seeing, any common answers coming in?
I mean, we're absolutely going to be seeing that sort of thing. In a sense, that's why Epic Games joined our center, because they, with their Unreal Engine, they want to make sure it's going to happen. The question is it going to be live action or CGI? It'll probably be CGI for a while until people figure out how to do it live action. But I'm actually in the process of running a student competition on what would you create for the metaverse now that's new. So our students are very much engaged in thinking about this stuff. They're storytellers, they're engineers, and they're looking for new opportunities, because getting back to that idea of familiarness or familiarityness, they want to find the things that can be new and impressive for them to fill out their resumes and potentially develop with our member companies as products or experiences. So yeah, it's all coming along, but we don't know what it's going to look like. And that includes NFTs and blockchain and everything else that might become part of it, physical and virtual.
Brian, what are you seeing the next 30 years?
The next 30 years. Well, good story will always be good story. It doesn't matter. It's not the what of storytelling that will change. It will be the how of storytelling that will change. But good characters, good story arc, good canons, good story world. My major concerns about us as a civilization is that the future must include access and must be inclusive. There's an organization called XRI, which is XR Inclusion, because XR is such a new industry. We have the opportunity to make sure that it's an equal playing ground as we've never had before in an entertainment industry. So I think that technology, boy, it's all here right now. It will evolve. There are so many pieces of the puzzle that we get to put together, and the pandemic showed all the little pieces of the puzzle that could be put together because people had to. So I prefer to err on the side of good story. I worry about the metaverse. I saw in the chat, there's a question about governance. I do worry about that. Ethics and governments and governance in the metaverse. We had a whole clubhouse on that. Very, very concerning. So I think there are moral and ethical questions. I'm not so concerned about the technologies because they keep advancing and we'll find a way to tell great stories with them. But I worry about the moral and ethical aspects of all of that.
Great. So as we close here, I just want to, did we miss anything? Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I would just say, if this field interests you, get an Oculus Quest 2 right now. You can get inside the headset and look at as much content from different genres as you can. In terms of AR, you can find plenty of stuff on your phone. But the best way to educate yourself about it before you go off to produce it, and then there are all sorts of ways you can get into production. But the best thing to do is just immerse yourself in the immersive world and be inspired by it. Decide what you're going to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of marketing, think about what people actually want to do or would be interested in, or come up with a new twist on a story or message that would capture their imagination. And as I said multiple times, think about the phone, knowing that glasses and headsets will be coming, and just be prepared for that. But gather experience now, because we're still in early days and we don't really know, nobody knows what the rules are. So Yeah.
And don't
that's
be afraid to ask the technologists to push the technology. Say to them, do you think it could do this? I have this idea. Do you think it could do this? Because if you're in collaboration with them, and that's really what needs to happen, is the collaboration between the creators and the technologists, that will help make things really useful to the audience.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I hope we've done a little bit of that here today. So in preparing for this, I read a lot about both of you and your work, and I learned that there's so much more that you both have done that is really inspiring and incredible and groundbreaking. So where can we find out about your work and your research and more about you if we want to keep the conversation going?
Right.
Phil, where can
So I'll give my website, then Brian can give his. So the Entertainment Technology Center website is etcenter.org. So that's etcenter.org. And we also have a daily newsletter, which is etcentric.org. That's etcentric.org.
Which I get and I love.
There you go.
For me, I don't keep our website updated. It just was a futile effort, even though people go to look up. For me individually, if you want to DM me on Instagram, feel free. It's BS Hurst. I'm happy to answer questions. You can see stuff on LinkedIn and Wikipedia. I actually never know what I'm going to be doing next. I just kind of do. I always say I'm here to help. So whatever I can do to get story out into the world and help people tell their stories, that's what I'm here to do.
Thanks. Well, this has been really, really informative for me. I hope it's been informative for everyone else. I'm sure it has been. I want to say thank you very much, Brian, Seth Hurst, and Phil Leleveld. And I also want to thank WICT for inviting us here today to their Tech It Out event. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the day and has a great rest of the summer.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.